Grizzly bears are among the most fierce and deadly predators in the world, having claimed the lives of over 180 people in recent years. Disasters struck after one man decided to become friends with these killers. After repeatedly camping in their territory with no safety equipment and armed with only a camera, one man accidentally recorded the death of him and his girlfriend when his grizzly friends suddenly turned on him. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. This is the tragic story of Timothy Grizzly Man Treadwell. Welcome to Final Affliction. The grizzly bear is a fierce predator and should be avoided at all costs. They have been responsible for over 180 deaths in recent years, although the majority of the time bear attacks are very rare. They will usually only attack when they are protecting food, their cubs, or territory, and would rather avoid humans altogether. However, there are some people who intentionally seek them out and enter their territory, like Timothy Treadwell, aka the Grizzly Man. Even at a young age, Timothy had always been particularly fond of animals, and even had a pet squirrel when he was a child. In his adolescence, he had his first encounter with a wild bear while studying them in Alaska, and that's when he realized his true life calling. He stated that he had lost his way at college, and he had fallen into alcoholism and drug use, nearly overdosing on heroin in the late 80s. This close call with death is what motivated him to initially search out bears and make them his lifelong passion. He studied the bears for 13 years and wrote a book from his findings called Among Grizzlies: Living with Wild Bears in Alaska. During this time, the bears became used to his presence, and he was able to touch them and play with their cubs. In his own words, he stated that he had a good relationship with bears based on mutual trust and respect. Following the release of his book, Timothy began to gain some recognition for his work in television and environmental circles. He traveled around the U.S. to educate local schools and appeared on many TV shows to explain his unique experiences with the animals. He even created his own charity with co-worker Jewel Polovec called Grizzly People, with a plan to continue protecting the grizzly bears in their habitat. Timothy was met with controversy throughout his life, mainly due to his interference with the animals. The National Park Service, in particular, were very unhappy and worried with his actions, as they believed that he was disrupting the animals' natural behavior, as well as putting himself at enormous risk. Timothy was also leading unauthorized tours with visitors to take them closer to the animals, something that was never allowed by the parks. He was thought to be reckless, as he refused to install any electric fences around his camps or carry bear spray, stating that bears would never hurt him due to their relationship together. Despite their fears, Timothy did not bring any further protection from the bears, and he would soon find out that his relationship with these bears could easily be broken. In October 2003, Timothy and his girlfriend, Amy Huguenard, visited Katmai National Park in Alaska. They were warned of the dangers of camping in the area at this time of year, as food was scarce and the bears were preparing for winter, eating anything they could to store for hibernation in the coming months. The aim of the trip was to see one of Timothy's favorite female brown bears and wanted to check that she was okay and ready for the winter. Amy was very reluctant to do this, as she was particularly scared of bears and just wanted to go home, but she stayed as she knew how important the bears were to her boyfriend. Throughout the trip, the pair tracked a few of the bears, but Timothy quickly realized that the majority of the bears that were familiar with him had gone into hibernation already, and there were a number of unfamiliar bears. Although he was slightly uncomfortable with the thought of being surrounded by bears that didn't know him, he still decided to stay and set up camp with Amy. On October 5th, the pair were setting up their video camera to get some more footage of the bears. The setup was nearly complete. The camera was on and recording audio, but the lens cap was still in place, providing no visuals as of yet. Soft rain sounds can be heard as Amy prepares the equipment from inside the tent. Suddenly, Amy calls out to Timothy asking him if he's still out there as she can't hear him. Then the screaming begins. Timothy was screaming to Annie to get out of the tent and to escape as he was torn apart by the large 28-year-old male bear. Amy opens the tent and begins screaming at Timothy to play dead to get the bear to leave him alone, which seemed to have worked for a time as the pair can be heard discussing whether the bear was truly gone yet. In this time, Amy is thought to have approached Timothy to tend to his wounds, which were unknown at this point, but she had to retreat as the bear returned to attack Timothy once again. This is when Timothy begins to panic, as he realizes playing dead is no longer going to work. He begs Amy to hit the bear with something, and she grabs a frying pan to smack the bear in the head. The bear lets go of Timothy's head and instead bites into his thigh to drag him away from Amy. Covered in blood and knowing he has no chance of survival past this point, Timothy begins shouting to Amy, telling her to run away and save herself. Although he struggled, he knew enough about bears to know he was done for. Unlike other victims of bear attacks, he didn't go into shock during the attack and was fully aware the entire time he was eaten alive by the animal that he loved so much. The bear was silent, aside from sporadic growls and grunts. The only real sound that could be heard during this ordeal is the sound of Timothy desperately trying to escape. His screams of agony and the dull sound of his body being dragged across the dirt away from his camp. Unfortunately, Amy still didn't leave. She was frozen with fear and in shock from the horrifying scene. She was already terrified of bears and had just witnessed her worst nightmare. She wasn't familiar with the area, being brought to the park by Timothy, and had no idea how to get back to civilization. On the tape, you can hear her suddenly begin to scream. It was a scream similar to that of a wounded animal, as she realized what she had just witnessed, as well as her situation. Unfortunately, her screams only brought the bear right back to her to finish the job, and Amy was also mauled to death by the same bear. The next morning, air taxi pilot Willie Fulton arrived at Affliction Lake to transport the pair out of the area. He looked around and thought he could see Timothy shaking a tarp to get his attention, but when Willie called out, there was no response. He decided to hike up the path, but quickly turned around as he felt like something wasn't right. Once he reached his plane, he turned around and saw something that made his blood turn cold. Through the fog, a large, nasty-looking brown bear was staring at him just aside from the path that he had just followed. He quickly climbed back into his plane and set off, hoping to scare the bear off with the engine so that Timothy and Amy would be able to pass through without meeting the bear. He kept his eyes on the bear and could see him slowly eating something. Willie circled the campsite 15 to 20 times, each time trying to get a better look at the bear and what it was eating. That's when he realized that the bear was eating a human rib cage. Horrified, he called the park rangers and asked them to come and survey the area, as he believed something had happened to the bear. A group of rangers arrived and began to trek up to the campsite, with Willie guiding them. They spotted a couple of bears on their way up, but as the bears ignored them, they continued without an issue. Suddenly, one of the rangers shouted, "Bear," alerting the others to the animal about 20 feet away. They began shouting at the bear in an attempt to scare it off, but it soon became clear that it knew they were there, was not threatened, and was actively stalking them. They all began shooting at the bear, firing a total of 21 shots between the three rangers. They didn't stop shooting until the bear was shot dead. They continued to the campsite where they found Timothy and Amy's 2 tents collapsed and torn, with a large mud pile at the front of the entrance. The rangers moved some of the mud aside and found Amy's body with her fingers pushing through the dirt. She had been buried by the bear, ready for winter. When they moved the rest of the mud aside, she looked as though she was peacefully sleeping, except for the clear fact that she had been almost entirely eaten by the bear. They were horrified but determined to find Timothy, although the hopes of him being alive were fading fast. They combed the nearby area and found bits of him scattered all around the forest. His head was found attached to a piece of his spine, with a horrific grimace on his face, capturing the pain in which he died. His right arm and hand were also found lying nearby, his watch still attached. It was a gruesome scene to find. As the rangers were discovering the bodies, another smaller bear attempted to approach them. He was approximately 3 years old and was stalking the team from 30 feet away, making it clear that he would continue to approach and attempt to attack them. He was swiftly shot by the rangers, who didn't want to take any chances given the situation they were in. Once Timothy and Amy's bodies had been extracted from the park, the rangers sent the corpses of the large bear to be investigated. A necropsy was conducted, and it was found that the bear had human remains and clothing within its stomach, concluding that this was the bear that had killed and eaten the couple. The younger bear had already been cannibalized by other bears, so we will never know if it had anything to do with Timothy and Amy's deaths. Ultimately, it's important to remember to respect wild animals and give them the space that they deserve. Even if bonds are formed with the animals, you never know what might happen, or what else might be lingering in the forest, waiting for the chance to bring you to your horrifying final affliction.